Hello again, Gills fans. Welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Blood TV. It is normally a time when you get used to seeing myself and Rhys, plus potentially an opposition fan, sit down to discuss all the fallout from the Saturday fixture with our match day review show. But unfortunately, due to issues with my laptop still ongoing, we cannot do that, cannot use Zoom. So, slightly different this weekend. What I have done is I was asked for the opinions of a few Gills fans, including Rhys, so you will still get to see his face on the screen. The transfer window, it slammed shut on Thursday at 11 p.m. So what I've done is I've got a selection of opinions discussing those that left the football club, those that we thought were going to leave the football club but potentially didn't, and of course, most importantly, those that arrived through the door to hopefully bolster the squad for the remainder of the 2023-24 campaign. So, without further ado, I will let you listen to the thoughts of said fans.
Hi everyone. Matt's asked me to offer a few minutes of my opinion on the transfer window, just to recap the business that the Gills have done. So talking through briefly around the incomings we've brought in, the outgoings we've let go, and I guess giving an opinion on the collective business. If I think back 12 months, we had an excellent transfer window, but ultimately we did need to do that at the time. So I think expectations have possibly been raised as to who we may or may not bring in January. But I think I'd probably throw caution, which has proven to be the case. I think that January, it always seems, every person in football seems to say that it's a difficult window to get right. You've got a short period of time to do so, coupled with, quite a lot of people in the market, and selling clubs probably know that they've got the upper hand when it comes to negotiations throughout most of the month, I imagine. So I'd probably say as a collective, it feels like maybe a 7. That might possibly be, to some people, a bit too much. I don't think it's been a terrible window. I must admit, I did think that a midfielder possibly would leave, namely Sean Williams. There was also talk throughout the month that Jeffries was possibly going to leave, that he may not be signing a new deal. And there was also rumour that Lapsley might be leaving as well. On the whole, I think our midfield's actually reasonably good. They don't create loads at the moment, but on paper, they do look like a decent midfield. So I'm not devastated that we've not brought in a midfielder. I did expect us to let Williams go, though, so I must admit I am surprised about that. I always felt with Alexander, who's left, that he was a good right back, or maybe say an above average right back. Steady, always did a job for us, but I felt there was a little bit missing from his game when it comes to being a wing back. And I would add that we don't get that from Robbie McKenzie either. So it was between the two of them, to be honest, as to who would go. But McKenzie's probably slightly more versatile, albeit he is injured a fair amount. So it was a toss-up between which one of them would go, in my opinion. I said on the last Gills in the pub that I felt that right back needed to be improved. And I would say we have done so. We've not seen a lot of Hutton yet, and we can't make too many judgments, good or bad at the moment. Let's see how they actually get on. But on paper, the guy's got the most assists in the Football League, I think, outside of Salah in the Premier League, I think I read. And he's a pacey lad. Against Walsall yesterday, he chased the ball down that others wouldn't, which showed a lot of determination. And we've not had that from our players for a while, I think it has to be said. Walker, the one that's come in, offers pace, which is something we've been crying out for. Hurtado is a complete maverick, it seems, really, and a complete unknown. It seems like an exciting one on paper, but again, game's not played on paper. And Andrews seems, from what I can gather, like a more mobile version of Ollie Hawkins. That's what the reports say anyway. But I must admit, I said it yesterday, that I'm a little bit perplexed as to why we've let lads go and dwindled our squad numbers when he's out till potentially March or mid-March, if you believe some rumour. But on paper, the lad looks like a good addition. I would say though, it's not been an all singing, all dancing window where we've signed players that I feel will take us to the next level. That being said, the guys we've let go, Nichols and Bon, although on paper you think, why are we letting them go? They've contributed to a 25 goal season, which is terrible. Let's be honest. So changing it up's not necessarily the worst thing. And I've said before, all of the lads we've brought in, especially the strikers anyway, they've got a point to prove. Andrews has been essentially let go by Birmingham. He'll want to prove that he's good enough to play at that level or get back up towards that level. Walker will want to prove that he can do it in the Football League. He hasn't yet. He didn't do it at Burton. All of his goals so far have been in non-league. And Hurtado's got the carrot of going to play for Watford, if he gets this right. In terms of the other outgoings, or the other outgoing, Lewis Walker, I think, probably right for him to move on. As I say, I am surprised to see Williams still here. But I think the key thing for most of the lads we've signed is that they're not on their last potential big payday. And I think that is the case with pretty much everyone we signed in last January. When you look at the business, although it was good, we've possibly overpaid for players when we desperately needed them. And then when you look at the output this team's performing in terms of goals scored and determination, I feel like there's a bit of not necessarily a poor attitude, but there's something missing from this team. Adding young, hungry players in, I think, will only help us in the long run. So although on paper, collectively, we look at it and say it's not been a particularly great window, I don't think it's been a bad one either, and hopefully it bears fruit for the remainder of the season. Look, we're not scoring enough goals. If we start getting that right, then hopefully things will start to pick up, and we're only a little bit, a couple of points outside the playoffs. So if those lads add that extra dimension, I'll be happy. That's me.
Hi guys, it's German Gills here. It's very early on a Sunday morning. I've had about 6 hours sleep. I've got a coffee here ready to go, and Matt's unfortunately, because his laptop is dead or something to do with technicalities, can't do our matchday review. So we are here to review the transfer window that has happened just recently, to go over a couple of players, the outgoings and the ingoings as well. So we'll start with the players that are leaving Gillingham. We have Lewis Walker, who has gone on to Woking. I think, it seems to be the most obvious decision to do that. Actually, from what I understand, he's been the utmost professional you could be, and I think he was at Woking before, and I think it's a really good step for him. And Woking are really struggling at the moment at the bottom of the National League, considering last season I think they're doing quite well. Maybe that's the impetus they need for them to push on and try and get out of the relegation zone to save their season. I wish Lewis the best of luck as well moving forward. It didn't quite work out for him, but I really did enjoy watching him play. But it's I think it's reminiscent of the season we had a year and a half ago, of the type of caliber of player we could get, unfortunately for him, and it's been right down the pecking order. But I think that is the right level for him now, and hopefully he could push on with his career. So best of luck, Lewis Walker. Next one is Che Alexander, with moving on with mutual consent. Let's make sure we got that one absolutely clear. But I have to say, Che Alexander again was instrumental in keeping us up in that horrific season when we nearly got relegated into National League. He was solid in his position, right back, and I always thought that he actually had a lot of energy going forward. I was quite happy with how he was playing. I thought he was it was a solid, consistent player. One goal of the season as well last year, a great goal against Wimbledon as well. I think that since before the Accrington game, that was actually the last time we'd come from a goal down or behind as well. So again, had a relatively decent eye for an attacking move, but again, slightly out of his depth, I would say now, considering the amount of the people who have in that position. It's completely overloaded on the right side of the pitch. So it was only probably the right decision for him to move on now, albeit it seemed to be a little bit of a sour taste at the end. We don't know what that is. I don't think we ever will, and I'll leave that one there. But best of luck, Che Alexander. One I'm going to do now quickly is Sean Williams staying. I mean, it's an interesting one because, again, when we signed him, he was a rock in the centre of the park, and albeit slightly on the more experienced side of a footballer, but I thought he's a decent player, and obviously can play a decent game of football, and again was instrumental in doing his bit in keeping us up out of the National League when he first came along. I think one of my fondest memories of him for just a Gills supporter was when he scored the last minute winner against Carlisle, and albeit they went up as well, Carlisle, we scored the last minute, and that's probably the loudest roar I've ever heard from the Rainer men through iFollow. But no, it's we haven't seen him for a while. I think there's a lot of competition in the middle of the park. And I think people like Ethan Coleman are keeping him out of the team, and maybe with age creeping up on him, I think he's going to broach 39 soon. Correct me if I'm wrong. This might be one of the reasons why we don't see much of him, and I think his performances are probably starting to deteriorate slightly. But yeah, I think he's done himself solid being in the centre of the park. But him staying is an interesting one. It'd be nice probably for him if he moved on. But who knows? If he can get a coaching role, that'd be nice at the club. I don't know what his plans are. I don't know what his coaching abilities like. But it is interesting that he's hanging around, considering he hasn't played football for a very long time, and there is a lot of competition in that position. And I'm going to do the next two together, and that's Macaulay Bonne and Tom Nichols. I'm going to stand pretty much by what I said when they moved on, and I think the fact, yeah, they've done their bit whilst they've been here. I think Macaulay Bonne, it didn't show us everything that he could have done, which he has in his locker, unfortunately. And that for someone who has scored so many goals at Leyton Orient, he does have it in there somewhere. And we saw glimpses of that when he was playing for us. But I just don't think it was unlocked here. He didn't get his full potential, and I don't think we saw everything he's capable of. So him moving on to Cambridge United on loan is probably is a good shout, actually, considering that he wants to play for Neil Harris. Neil Harris brought him in. It makes sense, absolutely. It wasn't playing his best football under Clements, and I think Clements obviously and him didn't see eye to eye, wasn't the type of player that Clements wanted, so it makes sense for him to move on to Cambridge and play under a manager which potentially fits his style, and also it's the league above as well, so it's a very attractive offer for Macaulay Bonne. And on top of that, Tom Nichols as well, again, when he scored in his debut, and I particularly that game at Hartlepool when we beat him 2-0, I think it was. He had such a good game. Was my man in the match that game as well. Was just everywhere, had that energy, and it's just kind of petered out this season. And I think both Macaulay Bonne and Tom Nichols, it's kind of gone a little bit stale. They can't score goals, and I think it's probably not the right fit for them. So it's probably good that we shook up the front line and that he's moved on to Mansfield. And again, I wish him the best luck at Mansfield, except when they play us. So now we're going to talk about the transfers coming in. The first one is going to be Ramiro Hutton. He comes in from Swindon Town, and his sale value, his market value, I have to do this in euros, by the way, because obviously I'm in Germany. So his sale value is €255,000. So, and the thing is with this, what I've noticed with Gillingham, they're signing players which potentially have sale on value if we keep them for a couple of years. And I quite like that. That's a good way to be able to be more sustainable moving forward, I think. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of football club exactly how they run, but that's what it looks like on the surface. Someone who's a little bit, not in the know of how a football business works entirely, but it looks like that from the surface. But if we look at his skill, he comes in with lots of assists. We've got a very strong right wing back position. So in terms of attacking moving forward, we know that he can put a cross in the box. We know that he's got that eye to be able to put a key pass in. We've seen that already. And if we're looking to have strong players up top in terms of Josh Andrews and Ollie Hawkins, he's the kind of player we need. But also, if we have fast players on the floor, we've seen already that he can put a decent ball in and across the floor. He can put a decent cross in the box. So hopefully that his assist prowess that he managed to put together at Swindon, he can continue here at Gillingham. So for me, I'm really excited about that sign. I think it's a good one, and one that I can see moving forward for a couple of seasons being very pivotal in our seasons. The first loan-in signing we're going to talk about is Josh Walker, who comes in from Burton Albion. Now, it's an interesting one. I think he was at Dagenham Redbridge beforehand, and looking at his stats in Dagenham Redbridge, he scored 20 goals for them in 56 games I've got here. So, he comes with a decent goal record in the National League, and then Burton obviously bought him, and he played 29 times for Burton Albion, but only scored 3 goals, and that was in League One. But he's missed a division in between that, so maybe the division League Two could be the division where we could rekindle his goal scoring form that he had at Dagenham. And already we can see he scored in his debut, albeit a very scrappy goal, but he scored in his debut at MK Dons. And I think we're having just played Walsall as well. It wasn't his strongest game, but you can see something's there. You can definitely see he has a little bit of pace, a little bit of a goal, and he also has that strength as well, which I think a lot of our players who we've maybe moved on to other clubs didn't quite have. And also, it's a fresh face on the pitch as well, with a point to prove and wanting to restart his career of goal scoring because he wasn't getting the goals at Burton Albion. So hopefully, we can see a lot more from him moving forward. He's already off the mark, and I'm excited about this one. But I think it's good that we've shaped up that forward line and we've shook it up a little bit. And Josh Walker, for me, has that hunger that other players that have moved on don't currently have at the moment. The other loan sign I want to talk about is Jorge Alberto, and we saw him for the first time yesterday at Walsall when we played, an hour, about 30 minutes or so. And I've got to say, what the amount of energy that he has is unbelievable. I mean, there was a few points in the game where he just had an eye to goal. He just wants a point to prove, and you can really see the impetus that he brought onto the game, the excitement that he brought when the ball was at his feet, is something that this Gillingham team definitely needs. Someone that just wants to go out and score. There were moments in the game he was not even part of any play, and when Gillingham missed, I can't remember the exact movement in the second half, but he was disappointed that we didn't even score. And then when we did score, he was real part of that celebration. So he loves playing football. He really wants to do well for any team that he is a part of, and you can definitely see that. And I just feel that you can see he has that South American flair, and it does exist. And obviously Watford, who have got a contract with him up until 2029, must see something in him. And his sale value or market value at the moment is €635,000. I've just read on the website that I use for this kind of stuff. So obviously Watford see something in him, and from the time we saw yesterday at Walsall, that half an hour, I think it's very clear that this could be a little gem loan signing that we found, and hopefully he can get a couple of goals. And if anything, if nothing but that, he makes the game exciting for everyone and adds the entertainment value. And if we can get a couple of goals in the mix, this is going to be an absolute belter of a loan signing. And the last one, obviously, I want to talk about is Josh Andrews, who comes from Birmingham, and we've bought him on a permanent. His market value is €214,000. This is an interesting one. Obviously, having someone like Josh Andrews in the club is excellent. He scored 5 goals at Accrington, or 6 goals, something. I think it's 5 goals. I think he scored at Accrington. Yeah, 5 goals, 1 assist in 20 games. But obviously we've signed him injured. People are actually having a go at Gillingham for that. Like, what I understand is that he'll be back within a couple of weeks, hopefully. I would understand the frustration if you bought a player that was injured for a couple of months, or to the end of the season they were injured. That would be a huge frustration. However, I think what we need to see in terms of signing someone that's injured, there's obviously a long-term goal here. It's obviously fitting into a plan that Clements wants to play with. So obviously this is kind of one of those signings that we can get use of. Like now, within the month or so, but also moving forward into the next season, we can continue to build whatever team we want to around Josh Andrews as well. Because of that, we've brought him on a permanent, you see. But in the outset, he looks like a player that will support Ollie Hawkins, maybe necessarily on the pitch, but also if Ollie Hawkins, who is a bit injury prone this season, Josh Andrews can take that place and play a very similar role, it seems, because he is 6'5". He's a tall guy. He scores. I think he said himself that all of his goals, or 4 out of 5 of his goals at Accrington, were headers. So, if you've got Hutton, who's going to put balls into the box, and you've got someone like Josh Andrews who's very consistent with scoring goals of headers, that is a chemistry waiting to happen. So I'm optimistic about Josh Andrews, albeit, yes, it is a shame that he comes signed injured, and lots of critical people will claim that as poor decision-making by the club. But there's obviously a long-term goal here, a long-term aim of Josh Andrews moving forward, although understandably fans want to have that success now. We all do, but this looks like a bit of a long-term signing, considering that he's injured for the next 3 weeks or so. So what do I rate the transfer window out of 10? I'm probably going to go over 7, based on the fact that we've got some decent players in. There were rumours of higher quality players trying to come in, but you never really know these rumours. But I think with the players that we've got some loans, we've got some permanents. We're obviously fine-tuning players. So for me, it's 7 out of 10. But obviously that's a slider that can change throughout up until April, up until May, to see where we're at the end of the season. It might go higher, it might go lower. We'll only know the real answer to that question when it comes to the end of the season. But for me, so far, it's a 7 out of 10. I'm pretty happy with what we've managed to get through the door.
So, just breaking the transfer window down, I think I voiced my opinions on Twitter that it wasn't something that I was very happy with. I think I called it something like shocking, or I was very negative about it, which I probably would, a little bit of an overreaction at the time when you do look at things like that. I think when you look at sort of focusing on the outgoings, some expected ones with Lewis Walker, I'm not too shocked him going to Woking, obviously not really getting a sniff in the team. Some obviously surprising ones, like I said, surprised a few people didn't end up staying, like the likes of Sean Williams and people who haven't really got much of a look in this year, especially recently. Not too surprised with Shea Alexander going. I think people can be very critical of him for the past couple months, where there has been errors leading to goals, and And when you look at weak links on the pitch, it's something that was clearly addressed when we brought Romeo Hutton in. But when it goes for Nichols and Bon, I don't really think Nichols hit the ground running this year. And Bon, I was pretty critical of him at the start, but then as it got better, as the season went on, he got a lot better, I thought. The more fitter he got, the more stronger he got. And when we started to play to his strengths, I was impressed with him. That's why I'm quite disappointed to see him go, really. And that's really where a lot of the frustration comes from, because we've obviously got rid of someone like Macaulay Bon, who he scored. His track record ain't amazing, but he has scored goals in this level before. When you bring it with the likes of Josh Walker, Josh Andrews and Jorge Hazardo, who particularly haven't got an amazing scoring record, it is a cause for concern. And we're taking risks. And it's a question of, can we really, we have this said amount of money and we have, a chance of going up and there's high expectation this year. Can we be afford to taking risks with guys like Hurtado, who, let's be honest, no one's really ever seen him play before. No one knows how good he is. It's a dip into the unknown, and those dips into the unknown can work well, as we've seen with guys like Tom Eaves and even Verlaine Oliver as such, who didn't have a particularly great scoring record when he came to Gillingham. They can be, risks. And, for every Tom Eaves, you have a guy who scores 20 appearances and 0 goals. Do you know what I mean? So for me, that there's concerns when you do dip into unknowns with guys who haven't got particularly prolific scoring records. But in terms of Romeo Hutton, something I'm very, very happy with. The right side of the defence was something that I did want addressed, and we did get it addressed with the signing of Hutton. So particularly very happy with that. And it does bring on to the Che Alexander going. We've got a perfect, even better replacement in him, Romeo Hutton. Regardless of what he does outside of the football pitch, I think we've got a real quality player on our hands, and someone that is definitely sought after. And I think in years to come, he'll definitely become an asset to our team. But as for going forward, I don't believe that there's been strengths. I don't believe, when you look at it on paper, are the guys that we brought in better than the guys that have gone? I'd probably say no. I feel strongly about it, and that's just how I feel, really, to be honest. But thank you for letting me voice my opinion on the transfer window, and appreciate having me on, and always willing to voice my opinion as and when I can, mate.
First of all, a big thanks to everybody that took the time out of their day. This was very sort of a last minute thing, so I do appreciate the time of everyone who has sent me videos giving their food for thought on the past 30 days or so. And there's some points in there that I just want to raise. I think Jack makes a really good one about paying over the odds at this time last year in 2023. Purely because that was probably necessity, wasn't it? We were rock bottom of the Football League. We were 6 points from safety, so we had to pay slightly over the odds to get people in, to encourage players to come and join a project that was one that was a struggling football club, both on and off the football pitch. The likes of Tom Nichols, Ollie Hawkins, Timmy Dieng, George Lapsley, Glenn Morris all arrived and immediately improved the first 11, albeit Glenn had been on loan for the first half of the campaign already. And I think it's fair to say that Ollie and Tom got sort of 9 goals between them, which ultimately played a big part again because we didn't score loads. So if you get 9 between your front two, that's a decent return. And again, it's a low bar, I understand that. But them and Lapsley got 3, I think, and Timmy chipped in with a couple. It was all vital points accumulated, which meant that we finished relatively safely in 17th. This year's been harder because you either have to pay ridiculous money to get good players, because if they're doing well, parent clubs are not going to want to let them go. And we're seen as more of a threat in the division now, aren't we? If you go back to this time last year, Mansfield Town wouldn't have seen us as a threat, so we're more than happy to give us Ollie Hawkins and George Lapsley. On to Rhys's section, there's a part he talks about Josh Andrews, and we've seen bits floating around on social media regarding how long the big front man is potentially out for. But I just think it's a project. So in terms of he can play the here and now, not right now, I understand, but hopefully within the next couple of weeks, it provides competition and an alternative to Ollie Hawkins, who we know has had lots of injury problems this season. And as recently as Saturday's game, he's gone off with his calf wrapped in ice, so we don't know how big a problem that could be moving forward. So, of course, we all want to see Josh Andrews on the grass as quickly as possible, and he is training on the grass, so I don't think he's too far away. But yeah, I see it as more of a project, so something for the here and now as soon as he's fit, but obviously moving forward, coming from Birmingham, like Jack said, players who want to prove a point, prove that they're good enough to play in the Football League. I think it's something that we'll see mid to longer term with Josh as well. And he had a decent half campaign, didn't he, with Accrington? 6 goals in all competitions in 22 games. It's one every 3.5. So you're looking at 15 goals a season, and assisting there as well. And finally, Louis, I think it's fair to say, was probably the most underwhelmed regarding the transfer activity. And you can see his point of view as well. Of course, he's very happy with Romeo Hutton coming in. Clearly thinks it's an upgrade on what we had with Che Alexander and still Robbie McKenzie at the club. And similarly, again, to go back to Jack's point, it was probably a case of one of the two potentially leaving. But yeah, Romeo seems to offer more in that role in the short time that we've seen him, albeit, unfortunately, we've not won a game in the 3 that he's played yet. But that's not on him. That's for other reasons. So yeah, you can see why different people have seen it slightly differently. So what about me? What do I think of the transfer window? I think if I'm going to put a number on it out of 10, I think then I'd say 7 out of 10. I think it was solid business. I think it was brave business. I quickly tweeted after the announcement on Thursday morning that Macaulay Bonne had been allowed to step up a division and join Cambridge United and Neil Harris on loan that I would wait until the transfer window had closed before making a judgment. But at the time, it felt like a silly decision, because forget how good or bad we think Macaulay Bonne was during his time with us. He was our top scorer. That's a fact. You can't argue with that. Best of a poor bunch? Potentially, but still the best. As Louis said, he knows his way around the Football League. So does Tom Nichols. So it was an interesting move at the time. We've replaced him, so we'll get on to them. So you can say that there's a risk element in that we're replacing a lot of experience in the EFL with him and Tom Nichols being allowed to depart, with potential and question marks, I think, over those that have arrived. Tom Nichols departing, I think, is a good move if we got a fee for him. He's 30 years old. He wasn't playing regularly. He'd only scored once in the league. So if we've managed to get anywhere near what we paid for him, I think it's good business. And that's no offence to Tom. I like Tom as a player. He's a top bloke as well. I've had numerous chats with him. And like I say, all the best to him moving forward, aside from one fixture, obviously, this season. In terms of the other departures, Lewis Walker was a gimme, wasn't it, really? He was probably 5th choice at the time. We've then added different options as well. So it'd be great for Lewis to go and get regular games at Woking again, and fingers crossed that he can kick on there. Che Alexander went by mutual consent. I think I was probably a bigger fan of Che than others, and I'm happy to admit that. I thought he was probably the most improved player in the second half of last season after the takeover. Looked a completely different fullback, provided assists, provided goals, goal of the season, took penalties successfully. But then looking at this campaign, maybe there was just something that wasn't quite right when we changed the system. Performance levels had probably dropped, I think it's fair to say. Not by loads. And yeah, like we've already said, Jack's alluded to it, I've mentioned it. It was probably a case that if we was going to get in a better right wing back option, then one of Che or Robbie McKenzie ultimately had to move on. And I think Jack's point about Robbie's versatility probably kept him at the football club. So we wish Che all the best. Like I say, he's a good lad, he's a good player, and I'm pretty sure he'll find a club as and when he wants to. Sean Williams, we thought would probably go. Hasn't had it looking in the last few weeks, months, but for one reason or other hasn't. I don't think it's a bad thing still having him around the training ground and the dressing room. We seem to lack leadership on a pitch. People who want to get round players and sort of drag them kicking and screaming through games. So we'll have to just see what happens with Sean, won't we? And in terms of the late additions, the forward options, Josh Walker came in, very promising cameo against MK Dons, scored a good goal against us in the FA Cup last season for Dagenham. Jorge Cabezas Hurtado comes in as the rogue element, the unknown. Watford fans don't know anything about him. I asked, they said that he was good on debut against Chesterfield in the FA Cup and set up a goal. In terms of what his strong points are, they're not sure, other than being very direct, because they've seen very little of him. But the length of contract that his parent club have given him says to me that he must be highly rated. And the last one was Josh Andrews on a permanent from Birmingham City. I've already mentioned, first half of the season. I've mentioned what I think about the project. So yeah, for me, probably a 7 out of 10. But the risk, and it is a big-ish risk, which is why I said right at the beginning of this last section, I think it's brave, the business. It could drop to a 5, because if Hurtado doesn't work out, if Andrews stays injured longer than we hope, and then Ollie Hawkins picks up a problem, then we're suddenly short in terms of a focal point and a target man. So yeah, it could drop down to a 4 or a 5, dare I say, if they don't score goals. I know it's a low bar that we're working with, which probably helps the new arrivals, considering our top scorer had 5 all season. But it could be a 9 if Josh Walker and one of the other two come in and gets half a dozen goals each that propels us into the playoffs, then suddenly it's brilliant business, and we're all sitting here and clapping Kenny Jackett, Andy Hessenthaler and Stephen Clements and the such. So I think there's quite a big swing in terms of where it could go, and we can only take it on face value at the moment without seeing loads of games. But yeah, I just think there is a fairly big differential that we could see. It could go from anywhere from a 4 right up to a 9 or 10. Yeah, and one final piece from me before I let you go. Of course, after the Alfie May saga back in the summer, a name that was mentioned in the winter window, I think it was no more than a nominal link, was of course Johnson, Clark, Harris. But maybe Jorge Cabezas Hurtado is Colombian for Johnson, Clark, Harris. I jest. It's just funny that it's the same initials. It's very us. But like I say, if he can come in and he can have half the goal output, that we know Johnson, Clark, Harris is capable of at higher level, then we might have found ourselves an absolute gem. Time will tell. As always, thanks for watching. We do really appreciate the ongoing support. Please, if you're new to watching us, then click that subscribe button. Put that bell on so you get notifications of any new content. Apologies again that it's been slightly different over the last few days due to technical issues with the laptop, but we still wanted to bring you content as much as we could. So I hope you've enjoyed this one. Thanks again to the lads that have contributed as well and sent in their thoughts on the 2024 winter transfer window. We'll be back later in the week with a match preview ahead of a big game Friday night under the lights at Meadow Lane as we take on promotion rivals Notts County. Unfortunately, won't be travelling up to that one because it is a Friday night, but we'll be watching on iFollow with interest. And then, of course, laptop permitting, we'll be back Sunday with a proper match day review, looking back on what hopefully is a good Gills performance. But until then, enjoy what's left of your Sunday evening and up the Gills.